What's going on, Team Killchain here, and we've had a pretty solid start to Dragonflight. Fury Warrior Guide is up on the channel if you have not yet seen it, and if that strikes your fancy, info card will be up on the top right hand side of the screen, and that'll send you on your way. But it's very important to maintain a healthy balance in all things. You're going to want to keep your Prot Warrior skills sharp and up in fighting conditions, so today we're going to temper your nerves into a stalwart behemoth that will absolutely clap the competition. It's a Prot Warrior Guide for all us off-speccers ready to queue big into Mythic Plus and beyond. Kicking it off with talent, so two predominant builds that are more or less the same strict setup with very minimal alterations based on rating and Mythic Plus requirements, with some flexibility on choice nodes for more defensive prowess or offensive pressure. Definitely worthwhile keeping in mind that the offensive pressure side of things, if you're easily able to tank certain encounter in a raid environment, for example, but need that extra damage boost for certain phases or a DPS check, then it's well worthwhile changing some of these choice nodes out. Just as with the previous video, green highlights are your standard pickups, which you'll see on the specialization side of the tree. Yeah. There's literally no changes in flexibility, purely comes from the choice nodes themselves. On the class side of the tree though, two notable changes. You will drop Uproar, the modifier for Thunderous Roar, and Bounding Stride, the modifier for Heroic Leap, in favor of picking up Stormbolt and Shockwave in your Mythic Plus setup. Again, it is important to note here that if your particular 5-man comp you're running with is heavy on stuns already, it actually may be worth not picking up this extra typical CC you would normally get to avoid hitting the stun diminishing returns. The specific specialization choice nodes you can swap around, you'll have Show of Force and Sudden Death, typically swapped on an AoE or single target basis. If and when your haste levels help rage generation feel pretty comfortable, and the cooldowns on your primary rage builders in Shield Slam and Thunderclap, if they're in a solid spot, you can opt for Heavy Repercussions talent, as this will help uptime on shield block, which actually in turn may be quite needed and useful, given the recent 10% global tank nerf. Again, depends how your defenses are feeling. If you aren't the primary tanker and, there's generally no threat to death in a particular encounter, and during defense, you can swap in for Massacre, further boosting your uptime on Execute for single target damage. And that works great in tandem with another choice node dropping off more self-defense in Punish, picking up Juggernaut instead. Again, just further boosting your Execute damage. With literally no change, this one setup on the specialization side allows you to easily, flexibly change in and out of different defensive and offensive talents, including spell block if and when you ever need it, with the one setup. It's all based on choice nodes. Next we'll tackle stats. Haste comes in at number 1 by actually a fair margin, as it contributes to so many things as a protection warrior. It reduces your global cooldown, reduces the plethora of all the short cooldowns that form the core part of your rotation, like your shield block, shield slam, thunderclap, ignore pain, etc, etc. We have a number of shorter cooldowns actually that form that part of what we do in moment to moment gameplay. This, along with the physical auto swings, helps increase rage generation through, again, shield slam and thunderclap, which subsequently means more rage to then be able to dump on that damage or mitigation through your revenge, execute, shield block, or ignore pain. Second, we have versatility, pretty typical stat for most tanks, simply just increasing your damage done by X and reducing damage taken by Y, but it's a very reliable stat. This will come in at number 2. Coming in the rear will be Crit followed by Mastery. Crit actually does help affect parry rate, but again, 99% of scenarios you're not really going to have parry rate be super important. Doesn't work on bosses, range attacks, spells, etc. But in a Mythic Plus environment where you've got a whole bunch of enemies whacking away at you, then by all means parry will obviously help in all those scenarios, as long as you're facing the enemies. Please, for the love of God, don't forget to face your enemies if you want to parry. And it actually boosts your damage output, right? That's also useful, especially again in a Mythic Plus or even in a raiding environment. You want to try and at least be efficient with your damage output as well. Mastery obviously doesn't have a offensive element to it. However, do keep in mind that while it just helps increase your block chance and critical block chance as well, it will allow Mastery to help impact spell blocks if you're using the spell block talent, which typically you can't block spells, but by using this particular talent, unfortunately the reality is 1.5 minute cooldown for a 20-second uptime on spell block isn't quite really on par with the regular old shield block, but that would be a little OP if we could just block all spells as well. But there will be certain dungeons that like Azure Vaults, for example, that could actually see some real use for spell block. So that is where Mastery will come into play for sure. Consumable time. Starting off with the enchantments, weapon is going to want to have Sophic Devotion, a nice little cheeky primary stat buff for there, nothing fancy, but it's our best option. Argument could definitely be had for having a second weapon with Frozen Devotion on it for Mythic Plus environments. However, the usefulness of this particular enchant for a Prot Warrior is a bit of a bell curve. The damage obviously increases up to a max of 5 enemies hit, and it's simply a damage proc. There's no defensive element to it whatsoever. And most of the AoEs similar have a soft cap of 5 or 8 in some cases as well. The difference is Sophic Devotion 1 has a defensive element of it. The more strength you have, the more you'll be blocking and things like that. As well as the strength increases all abilities, including ones that do damage with a reduced effect beyond a certain number of targets. Strength tangibly affects and increases things to all targets hit, things like Thunderclap as well, whereas obviously Frozen Devotion caps out its increase of damage beyond at the 5 targets. So for Cloak, Regenerative Leech is the way to go here. Nice little bit of leech and out of combat healing. Chest piece, we grab the Sustained Strength, primary stat buff, as well as a nice chunk of stamina. Braces mirror the Cloak in that we want the Devotion of Leech for our braces there. Legs, go ahead and grab the same as the DPS warriors. We get the Fierce Armor Kit. Boots, Watcher's Loam for the stam buff. I guess if you really want to be a speedy boy, you can grab Plains Runner, but in terms of just what you're supposed to be as a protection warrior, we're already quite mobile, to be brutally honest. Watcher's Loam will be the best go-to here. Lastly, the rings, we definitely want to grab Devotion of Haste. Again, as the stat section of this video, we saw Haste is literally bis as fuck when it comes to our secondary stat. That's the way to go for there. For Mythic Plus, our best file or vial, someone in the comments is going to have to teach me how to pronounce that word, will be Eye in the Storm. Provides a stacking strength buff based on the number of enemies that recently hit you. Literally perfect for Mythic Plus. This is definitely the go-to vial for that. For tanking raids though, Elemental Chaos will likely be our best option here. There's always a discussion to be had about static empowerment. There's just so many fights that are not going to allow you to stand still to get the best benefit out of it. In any sort of realistic scenario, I just don't think this vial is honestly going to be used. I would avoid it for now for sure. For Combat Potion, nothing fancy, just like DPS warriors, we grab the Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power, which increases our primary stat, so strength, by even more. Stock up as well on refreshing healing potions for your typical heal pot. However, Potion of Withering Vitality can always be used as well for those odd occasions when you need the extra snap heal, but rely on your healer or your own self-healing to help mitigate the ticking damage after you've done that initial heal. No Sharpening Stones again. Sad day for Blacksmithers there, but we want to grab the Howling Rune from the Scribes, a flat haste buff for our weapon. As for the yummy food, feasts are always going to be the best option, but stock up on some personal food as always. Timely Demise will help you get the haste buff that you'll be wanting if there's no feasts available. As for our gems, Primalist Gem is going to be the Fierce Limited Diamond, with all the other gem slots basically being some variation of haste or haste and versatility. Based on what sims you have, yes, there's always going to be certain breakpoints where haste might dip in usefulness, etc. But we have the Quick Yesemerald being the flat haste, Energize Yesemerald being the haste high and verse low, and then the Energized Malachite being the versatility high and haste low gem. So you can mix and match whatever happens to sim the best for that. But a good rule of thumb is we always know that, yeah, if you're starting to push ridiculous 32% or more haste, then it's time to start flowing in some versatility on your gems as well. As above 32% haste is when you start hitting diminishing returns, and it gets even worse as you get above 39% haste, I believe. It goes to 20% diminishing return above 39%, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I know those numbers are roughly correct. Finally, we're going to leave off on the rotation, although it would more accurately be called a priority list. Protection Warrior definitely has a lot of abilities to micromanage compared to their Fury DPS counterparts, so I want to go ahead and categorize them as best I can to kind of give you a good insight on how you might want to group, position, and keybind these abilities to work well with each other. We obviously have abilities that generate rage and spend rage, so your primary rage generators are going to be through Shield Slam and Thunderclap. Min-maxing the usefulness and hitting these strictly on global cooldown, including when they get the free resets, is really going to help you overall, even in a defensive nature as well. Although these abilities are obviously physically doing damage and there's no direct correlation with any defensives, there is indirect correlation with defensive by the fact that you're maintaining good rage generation, which allows you to spend rage on the defensive abilities as we go forward. So there's going to be free resets from Shield Slam with the Devastator talent. There's going to be Thunderclap weaving through Avatar thanks to the Unstoppable Force talent. practicing that is going to be pretty paramount to making sure you get the most out of your warrior. While Avatar is up, you're going to be weaving Thunderclap every second global cooldown. So if you're in a pretty comfortable position and you want to be all about throughput and rage generation, you'll be swinging it through Shield Slam, Thunderclap, Revenge, Thunderclap, think offensively. But if you're in a bit of a dicier position and not really quite sure what decision to make, or if you're a bit uncertain, like, oh, I feel okay, but I'm just not 100% confident, then play more defensively, right? It's better to be safe than sorry. Then you'll be weaving your Thunderclap with Ignore Pain, Shield Block, Shield Wall, etc. Actual rage spenders though, defensively, and most importantly, Shield Block, maintaining that as close as you can to 100% uptime is going to be of the most importance, and it immediately separates a good from a bad warrior, right? So practice that. Train your eyes, especially in lower keys and easier raid encounters. Train your eyes to track the shit out of your shield block. You'll get 2 charges of the shield block ability itself, plus the actual shield charge ability with Champion's Bulwark will also give you a 3rd source of shield block uptime. Weak auras will go a long way to help you tracking that as well. Your second defensive rage spender will be Ignore Pain. Very powerful, and typically I would suggest going to this in most scenarios to maintain some sort of Ignore Pain, especially with Brutal Vitality. As long as you have Ignore Pain on you, you'll help maintain that through the Brutal Vitality talent as well. If ever in doubt, always be safe than sorry. Dead tanks don't tank, right? So it's always better, to hit a defensive rage spender through Ignore Pain or Shield Block, rather than just going, I want to pump big numbers, so I'm always going to revenge spam. Speaking of that though, the offensive rage spenders though, we do have revenge. That's going to be used in most scenarios, as it's definitely the best for AoE, and single target we won't have any other option until you're in execute phase. Then by all means, if you're in a single target position and execute is available, then that'll be your best rage spender in that scenario. As long as you're feeling pretty comfortable in terms of defensives, then that'll be your best bet there. There are going to be a lot of moment-to-moment decision-making gameplay elements to a protection warrior that will take a little bit of time. Don't stress. Always play defensive first. I can't count on my number of fingers and toes how many times I've had a position where my shield block might be about to fall off. I have a free shield slam flashing in my face, as well as a free revenge flashing in my face. And it can be a little bit daunting in terms of like, oh, which button do I hit? I was told to always min-max my shield slam because, I need to focus on rage generation, blah, blah, blah. Again, if you're ever in doubt, always play more defensively. First, I would hit my shield block and then make sure I have some Ignore Pain. Then I can spend my free Shield Slam and free revenge after that. Hopefully that gives you guys a bit of an insight and is helpful in some way, shape or form. More Fury videos will come now that the Dragonflight Season 1 is officially out. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two from the guide. Thanks very much. If you're liking digging what I'm putting down, so to speak, throw a subscription to the YouTube channel. It helps us out massively. I'd love to be able to grow to 10,000 subs. That's my goal for this time next year. Give me a year, I reckon we can hit 10k. You can help out with that. That'll be amazing. Like the video if you're digging. And thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time. Peace.